Good morning. So we've been learning about chemical reactions, and today's lesson is about what would happen if you wanted to go into the lab and actually do one of these reactions. You would need to measure out specific amounts of the chemicals that you're going to be reacting. And in order to measure out the right amounts, you would need to know the formula masses of these substances. So this lesson is about how to find the formula mass of a chemical. And before we get to the new notes, I wanted to remind you about parentheses in formulas because they can make finding the formula mass just a tiny bit complicated, not really, but just as a reminder. So remember, parentheses show groups of atoms that stay together in a reaction. So they're like the polyatomic ions from table E. So when you look at this formula over here, AlCN3, this means there's three groups of CN, cyanide ion, attached to an aluminum atom. So there's one CN, there's another CN, there's another CN. So this is one way to visualize it. But when you're doing it on paper with just the formulas, the way to think about it as far as the mass is that the number outside the parentheses multiplies everything inside it. So this 3 means there's 3 C's and 3 N's in the formula, and you can see them down here. So when you have something, for example, a little bit more complicated, like Al2SO43, one thing to remember is this 3 outside the parentheses only affects what's inside the parentheses. It doesn't affect the Al. So there's 2 aluminum atoms, not 6, just 2 aluminum atoms. And then one way to think about this 3, it distributes like in math class. So if you were to like picture it, that would mean that there's 3 groups of SO4. So there's 3 S's and 4 and 4 and 4 is 12 O's. So if you just multiplied 3 times 1 S is 3 S's, and 3 times 4 is 12 O's. So we can imagine, like we could draw a picture of this if we wanted to. So as far as what I'm asking you to do today, I'm asking you to find the formula mass of 9 different chemicals. And the formula mass is just the mass of all the atoms in the formula added up together. So for example, what is the formula mass of water? So we learned before about how to find the mass of elements. We just look it up on the periodic table. So as a reminder, the atomic mass is the number in the upper left-hand corner. We're going to round it to the nearest whole number. And so for the case of water, there's hydrogen, which has a mass that rounds to 1. And there's oxygen that has a mass that rounds to 16. So to find the formula mass of water, first I would say, okay, hydrogen has a mass of 1, oxygen has a mass of 16. Then I'm going to go back to the formula and look how many atoms of each type do I have. So I have 2 hydrogen atoms, and they each have a mass of 1. And then since there's no subscript, I only have 1 oxygen atom. So to get the total mass of all the atoms, I take the hydrogen mass of 1, multiply it times 2 atoms, and get 2. The mass of 16 times 1 oxygen atom is 16, and then when I add it together, I get 18. And the units for the formula mass are atomic mass units because those are the units on the table. Pretty easy, right? Let's do 2 more examples. What about carbon dioxide, another very common gas? What's the mass of 1 carbon and 2 oxygen atoms? So first we look on the table. We see that carbon has a mass of 12, oxygen has a mass of 16. So mass of 12, 16. How many atoms of each type do we have? Carbon, there's just 1. Oxygen, there's 2. When you're doing this, be careful about capitals versus lowercase. Since these are both capital, you know they're 2 different elements. So then I multiply, carbon has a mass of 12. The 2 oxygen atoms together have a mass of 32. So altogether, that's a mass of 44. Easy peasy. last example. What if we have parentheses? The beginning of the process is the same as always. First, you look up what are my masses of, in this case, my three main elements, M, G, O, and H. So I look at my table. O has a mass of 16. Mg has a mass of 24. And H has a mass of 1. So I write that down. And now I go back to the formula and I multiply times how many atoms of each type there are. So there's just one Mg atom. Remember that 2 does not affect it. Now, if you just ignore this 2 and look inside the parentheses, there's just one O atom. There's an invisible 1 subscript. So 1 times 2 is 2. And same for the hydrogen, 1 times 2 is 2. So then you actually multiply, use your calculator, and then when you combine these masses together, you get 58 atomic mass units. That easy. So for today's assignment, you're gonna write these notes down if you feel like you need to, and then you have 9 examples I want you to do. So I made it a little bit easier for you to do on the computer. I made these tables for you already. Normally I make you write it out on paper, but I made a few. So you have 9 formulas. This is PbSO4, so you write PbSO, and you look up the masses, the number of atoms, multiply to get the total mass, and then figure out the formula mass. So I have an example here for you. There's also the notes. Hopefully you shouldn't have too much trouble. So do the 9 examples, use your calculator, use your reference tables. It'd be easiest if you had the reference tables open next to you, but you could also go here to an online copy of the reference tables. Good luck, and let me know if you have any questions.